Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first explainer in the series of personality development, titled Role of Modern Psychology in Personality Development. Let's jump right in, because today we're going to discover how modern psychology essentially hands us the ultimate builder's toolkit for constructing our personality. You know, for a really long time, people thought of personality as just your external appearance, right? Like your social manners, how sharply you dressed, how politely you spoke, or maybe just a genetic lottery you were permanently stuck with. People assumed you were simply handed a personality at birth, and, well, that was the end of the story. You just had to deal with it. But modern psychology has completely revolutionized that idea. It proves that your personality is actually the entire, incredibly complex psychological ecosystem of who you are. We're talking about your deeply held thoughts, your spontaneous emotional reactions, your underlying hidden motivations, and your everyday behaviors. It's a dynamic, living structure that you can actively design, renovate, and improve over time. So grab your mental head hats because we are going to look at the exact science-backed frameworks you can use to build a stronger, much more resilient self.
Now, the absolutely crucial word to focus on right off the bat is dynamic. This comes from Gordon Allport's classic definition, and it literally shifted how we view human nature. He called personality a dynamic organization of psychophysical systems. And honestly, this concept alone proves that your personality isn't just some fixed destiny. It's something you can actively, purposefully develop. Sure, we all have continuity. You're recognizably you from year to year, and your childhood friends still know who you are. But dynamic means you have the power to change through experience, learning, reflection, and intentional practice. And it's not just all in your head either. The word psychophysical means our biology and our psychology are deeply intertwined. The physical neural pathways in your brain literally rewire themselves as you build new habits and fresh ways of thinking. You aren't carved out of stone, it's much more like you're made of clay. And modern psychology is finally giving us the hands to mold it.
When you think about it, personality development is truly like maintaining a massive multi-room mansion. It goes so far beyond just external appearances. Just think about the sheer number of dimensions that make up who you are. You've got the physical behavioral dimension, which is basically the foundation of your discipline, your daily routines, and your physical habits. Then step into the emotional dimension, which governs your resilience, your ability to regulate your feelings, and your capacity for real empathy. Next up is the cognitive dimension. This is your actual thinking style, how you process complex information and your problem-solving skills. Then we have the social dimension, covering how well you step into leadership roles, how you communicate, and how you cooperate with others. Meanwhile, the moral dimension is all about your core, unshakable values, your integrity, and your sense of responsibility. And if we add in the motivational and well-being dimensions, which cover your grit, your lifelong search for meaning, and your baseline optimism, you really start to see the whole shebang. Developing your personality means you're doing active maintenance and making upgrades in every single one of these interconnected rooms.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, defining the dynamic self. Second, uncovering traits in depth. Third, rewiring habits and thoughts. Fourth, emotions, strengths, and growth. And finally, the integrated framework.
All right, let's dive straight into part one, uncovering traits and depth. This is all about the blueprint and the foundation.
To build anything, you need a blueprint, right? Well, trait psychology, championed by brilliant researchers like McCrae and Costa, acts as exactly that. It helps us run a comprehensive audit of our current structural strengths and weaknesses across 5 major dimensions, famously known as the Big Five. Think of it as assessing your current psychological real estate. For instance, are you high in openness, constantly craving new experiences, wild ideas, and creative outlets? Or do you heavily prefer the comfort and predictable stability of a routine? What about conscientiousness? If you score low there, your physical spaces might be a bit chaotic, and you might find yourself missing deadlines pretty frequently. If that's the case, your personal development plan needs to focus heavily on discipline and goal-oriented habits. And if you score high in neuroticism, meaning you experience stress and negative emotions a bit more intensely than the average person, your growth lies in learning serious stress management and emotional regulation techniques. The point here isn't to put you in some rigid, inescapable box. No way. It's to give you a highly precise, realistic starting point so you know exactly which areas of your personality need scaffolding.
But beneath that blueprint lies the deep foundation. Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic theory teaches us that true, lasting development requires understanding our unconscious patterns. And this is fascinating because it forces us to take a flashlight and look deeply into the basement of our minds. Imagine a colleague who constantly micromanages their team, acting incredibly arrogant and constantly criticizing everyone else's work. Well, psychodynamic psychology suggests that this arrogance might not be genuine confidence at all. Actually, it might just be a powerful defense mechanism, concealing a deep-seated insecurity and a profound fear of failure. Or maybe unexplained, sudden anger in a romantic relationship is actually hiding a profound fear of abandonment. If we only try to fix the surface-level behavior, say by sending that micromanaging boss to a generic leadership seminar, without addressing the unconscious fears, unresolved conflicts, and emotional wounds driving the behavior, that new structure is eventually going to crack. True personality development requires deep introspection and emotional honesty. It's about healing those past wounds so we gain the freedom to choose healthier, more authentic responses in our daily lives.
So, once we understand our underlying baseline traits, and we've explored our deep, sometimes messy, unconscious motives, we have to ask a highly practical question. How do we actually change our daily actions and rewire our minds? Because, let's be honest, it's great to have deep psychological insight, but insight without daily action doesn't actually get the house built.
Which brings us perfectly to part 2, rewiring habits and thoughts. Let's look at the scaffolding.
If you want to know how personality translates into the real world, B.F. Skinner's behavioral psychology shows us that personality is largely expressed as habits. You don't become disciplined just by thinking really hard about being disciplined. You become disciplined by practicing measurable, repeatable steps every single day. Let's say you want to build the personality trait of being highly disciplined and physically active. You don't just overhaul your entire life overnight. If you want to become a runner, you don't wake up on a Tuesday and try to run a full marathon. You use behavioral strategies. You begin with a tiny, incredibly manageable routine, like simply putting your running shoes on at 6 a.m. every day and walking around the block. Then you use positive reinforcement by rewarding the completion of that small routine with a great hot cup of coffee. You self-monitor, maybe tracking your progress on a wall calendar. And then you gradually increase your responsibility, eventually shifting from a walk to a 1-mile run. Actions followed by reinforcement are repeated. It's such a simple concept, but it is incredibly powerful. You are quite literally shaping your personality one reinforced habit at a time.
But there's a really interesting contrast we need to talk about. While behavioral psychology focuses strictly on the outside, how our external actions are shaped by consequences and rewards, cognitive psychology flips the script and looks at the inside. It looks at how our internal thoughts shape our emotions and our behaviors. Imagine two different entrepreneurs who face the exact same massive financial setback. One gives up entirely, sells everything, and sinks into a deep depression. The other analyzes what went wrong, adapts their strategy, and starts a new, significantly more resilient business. Why the huge difference? Well, it's not the external event that determines their reaction. It's their internal interpretation of that event. To fully develop our personality, we absolutely have to master both sides of the coin: the external habits we perform every single day, and the internal mental scripts we constantly replay in our heads.
So, how do we actively change that internal script? Pioneers like Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis proved that distorted thinking directly creates maladaptive behavior. If you bomb a major presentation at work and your automatic, knee-jerk thought is, "I failed once, so I am completely useless and terrible at my job," you are actively constructing a personality characterized by helplessness, fear, and anxiety. But through a process called cognitive restructuring, you can intentionally step back, hit pause, and shift that narrative. You can change it to, "Okay, I failed in one attempt because I was underprepared, but I can learn from this and improve my public speaking skills." Do you feel the difference there? Shifting your inner narrative like this directly develops resilience, confidence, and motivation. You are intentionally correcting cognitive distortions, things like overgeneralization, all-or-nothing thinking, or catastrophizing. Those distortions act like hidden termites in your psychological framework, and cognitive restructuring is how you clear them out.
And this naturally brings us to Albert Bandura's concept of self-efficacy, which is a vital cornerstone of his social cognitive theory. Self-efficacy is simply that deep-seated core belief that you actually have what it takes to successfully perform the actions required to reach your goals. It's a real game changer because it essentially dictates your motivation levels and your emotional reactions to difficult challenges. If you have high self-efficacy, you view a complex, difficult task as a fun challenge to be mastered, like a giant puzzle to be solved. But if you have low self-efficacy, you view that exact same task as a profound threat that needs to be avoided at all costs. The beautiful thing about self-efficacy, you can build it. You build it through mastery experiences, getting those small, early wins under your belt. You build it by observing positive role models who are succeeding. And you build it by managing your physical and emotional states, like learning to interpret a racing heart before a speech as excitement rather than pure terror. You actively shape your environment, and your environment shapes you right back. It's a dynamic, ongoing loop that Bandura called reciprocal determinism.
All right, let's step inside the house now. Part 3, Emotions, Strengths, and Growth, the interior.
Daniel Goleman's extensive work has shown us beyond a shadow of a doubt that emotional intelligence, or EQ, is absolutely central to a mature personality. Look, you can be the smartest, most technically gifted person in the room, but if you cannot regulate your emotions, your personality development will completely stall out. We've all seen it, right? Brilliant professionals who derail their own careers because they lash out in anger the second they're under stress. Let's break down these skills. Self-awareness gives you an honest, unvarnished understanding of your actual strengths and weaknesses. Self-regulation is what allows you to control anger, fear, and impulsiveness. It's what allows us to respond thoughtfully to a highly irritating email rather than reacting impulsively and making the whole situation 10 times worse. Empathy builds profound social sensitivity and deepens our relationships, while motivation gives you positive goal orientation. Many things we perceive as unchangeable personality flaws, like chronic jealousy, explosive anger, or deep, lingering resentment, are honestly just failures of emotional regulation. Mastering your EQ is exactly like installing an advanced, highly responsive climate control system in your psychological house. It keeps everything livable.
Now, let's look at humanistic psychology. Pioneers like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow remind us of something beautiful. Environments of deep respect, not fear or constant heavy judgment, are what actually drive us toward genuine self-actualization. You see, humanistic psychology originally arose as a much-needed rebellion. It was pushing back against older theories that only looked at human pathology, mental illness, or robotic behavioral conditioning. It stepped up and said, hey, humans have inherent dignity, boundless creativity, and an innate drive to fulfill their ultimate potential. Carl Rogers heavily emphasized that for a personality to truly mature and blossom, there must be harmony between our everyday experiences, our self-concept, and our behavior. We desperately need what he called unconditional positive regard. Think about a close relationship or a mentorship you've had where you felt entirely accepted for who you are. In that kind of environment, what happens? You stop hiding behind defensive walls. You stop faking confidence. You finally feel safe enough to ask the dumb questions you need to learn. You step fully and bravely into your true, authentic self.
And building right on top of that, Seligman and Duckworth's positive psychology adds to this interior design by shifting our entire focus. For a very long time, the field of psychology predominantly asked, what is wrong with you, and how do we fix it just to get you back to baseline normal? Positive psychology asks a way better question, what is right with you, and how do we amplify it to help you truly thrive? It focuses squarely on well-being, meaning, and human flourishing. Add in Angela Duckworth's massive research on grit, and you have an absolute game-changer for personality development. Because grit isn't just about raw, natural talent or being a born genius. It's passionate perseverance for long-term goals. Think of the medical student who fails a crucial exam, but instead of giving up, figures out a brand new study strategy and keeps going. Compare that to the naturally gifted student who just quits the moment the material gets genuinely hard. Developing your personality means you don't just patch up what's broken. You actively build courage, gratitude, and sustained gritty effort. You keep pushing through the difficult renovations of your life because you have a profound, driving sense of purpose.
And listen, this scaffolding requires lifelong, continuous maintenance. Erik Erikson's developmental psychology thoroughly disproves the stubborn myth that your personality firmly locks into place the moment you turn 18 or 21. No way. He proved that our personality is a continuous, unfolding journey that evolves through every single stage of life. As a young child, your entire personality structure was focused heavily on building basic trust and physical security. Then in adolescence, your massive psychological project was forming your unique identity, which, by the way, is exactly why teenagers naturally rebel and test boundaries. Then in adulthood, your personality development shifts its focus to building deep intimacy, driving career productivity, and making a tangible social contribution to the next generation. Finally, in our older adult years, the core task becomes finding profound meaning, reflecting on our legacy, and achieving integration. The takeaway here? At every single stage of your life, there is a central conflict to resolve. That means your personality is always under construction, always growing, and constantly adapting to the new, complex demands of your life.
All right, so how do we make sense of all this? Let's move to part 4, the integrated psychological framework, bringing it all together.
When we bring our entire Builder's Toolkit together, we see clearly that a fully developed personality isn't just one isolated thing. It is an intricate, highly balanced system. It requires honest self-assessment from trait psychology, so we clearly know our biological and structural baseline. It requires the deep, introspective insight of psychodynamic theory to foster genuine, lasting emotional healing. It requires the incredibly practical application of behavioral psychology to forge ironclad discipline through daily habit formation, right alongside cognitive psychology, which gives us sharp mental clarity and resilient problem-solving skills. Social cognitive theory hands us the specific tools to build self-efficacy and unshakable confidence. Humanistic psychology gives us a North Star of authenticity and purpose. And positive psychology fuels the entire engine with hope, meaning, and grit. All of these distinct theories don't compete, they merge into one cohesive, dynamic self. You aren't just one of these concepts, you are the beautiful, complex sum total of all this integrated, lifelong psychological work.
And please remember, this grand construction project doesn't just happen in a vacuum. We are deeply, inherently social creatures. Our supportive environments, the dynamics of our families, the cultural norms we are raised in, the media we consume every single day, and our educational systems, they actively shape the materials we use to build ourselves. A psychologically healthy environment, like a highly supportive workplace or a loving family, naturally promotes curiosity, empathy, and healthy risk-taking. Conversely, a harsh, highly critical environment can breed fear, withdrawal, and rigid defense mechanisms. Furthermore, modern psychology offers incredible professional scaffolding through counseling and psychotherapy. Seeking therapy or counseling isn't just for navigating severe crises anymore. It is a highly structured, supportive space for intentional personality refinement. Whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy to finally break an entrenched bad habit or humanistic counseling to discover your life's true purpose, your environment is the vital real estate on which your entire personality is built.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, incredibly empowering thought. You are absolutely not a fixed destiny. You are a dynamic, ever-evolving project with truly endless potential for growth. You now have the ultimate modern psychology toolkit at your disposal, bridging your deep internal thoughts with your daily external habits. So I have to ask, what are you going to build next? Which specific room of your psychological house needs some dedicated attention today? Is it your emotional regulation, your daily behavioral habits, or perhaps restructuring a deeply entrenched negative thought pattern? The power and the tools are entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this exploration. If you found value in this explainer, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel so we can continue to bring you more in-depth insights into the fascinating world of personality development. See you next time.